Okay, I see the room is getting full, and we had an urgent notification, so I will change the order of agenda and start with the whale drawing methods and associated bonding initiative. I was informed by several delegations here that it's not fair to limit the competition just to commissioners, that commissioners have already enough privileges going into private commissioners' meetings. And we considered this request and we approved it. So now the participation is broadened and intergovernmental organizations can participate as well. And NGOs can participate as well. You will have to see who is your friend from with the different views. That's up to you, but otherwise all the conditions apply as for the commissioners. Thank you. Okay, and now I open the afternoon session. And I will open the agenda item 13, which is scientific committee. On our first day, you remember, on Monday, under agenda 3, we had a condensed presentation of the work of the scientific committee. And now we will have the second part of the presentation. So I will pass the floor to the chair, the outgoing chair and vice chair, or incoming chair of the scientific committee to make this presentation. So please, the floor is yours, Alex.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. So on our presentation on Monday, we covered topics presented to the SC report from the last 4 years. And let me start the slide. So the details of the reports are available on the website under plenary agenda number 13, and it's shown there on the slide. And at the presentation on Monday, we requested the Commission to ask the Scientific Committee about topics that they wanted to see covered in more detail. And we received a number of inquiries. And thank you very much to all of you who came to talk to us or sent emails. And we appreciate the responses we received. So today we will address questions received at this presentation now. So in addition to the reports, we also have our work plan, which has already been discussed both in the budgetary subcommittee, in the FNA subcommittee, and also in the presentation of FNA earlier in this meeting. But I welcome you to, if you're interested, to look at document BSC/68/5.2/01 Annex D. That's where the scientific committee work plan is. So just to remind everyone, in the first presentation, we divided the scientific committee subcommittees or subgroups in different categories. We have species-based categories. Those are the subcommittees that deal with specific or species. We have the specialist support. You might remember that Robert mentioned the specialist support is the health orders subcommittees. We have the whaling-based groups, and then we have the topic-based groups, and we will be referring to these groups during the presentation today. So one of the questions we got was about the population assessments that the scientific committee does. And population assessments are key to understanding the status of cetacean populations. Through these assessments, we can determine if stocks are increasing, declining, and whether, how, and to what degree current or future threats can impact those populations. Population assessments are in the core of the scientific committee, and we were questioned about those, how they're conducted, and what the various terms associated with these assessments mean. So we modified a diagram that you can find in the scientific committee's handbook as an attempt to explain in a simplified format how the assessments are done. And I'm going to go through the steps. The first step is the pre-assessment, which typically doesn't have a timeline or a time frame to be completed. And in the pre-assessment, what we do is we have compilation of information, both on whales and human activities, and we review data. And what kind of data do we review? We look at stock structure, we look at abundance, we look at removals. Removals can be catches, removals can be by caught animals, can be ship-stricken animals. And we'll look at the environmental variables that might affect these populations. We also look at biological parameters, survival, reproduction, and those are also part of the process of the assessment. And essentially, we're doing a review of the data. Do we have good quality data? Do we have enough data to do an assessment? And if we do, then we go to the next step, which is the assessment itself. In general, the assessments are expected to be done within a biennial period. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Robert. Thank you. They're expected to be done within a biennial period, and they typically include 2 workshops and 2 annual meetings to be completed. They're not always done like that, but this is the guidelines that we try to follow. And in the assessment is we continue to review information as new data may become available between the pre-assessment and the assessment. But in the assessment phase is where we develop a mathematical model to understand the trajectory of the population over time and to understand how removals can affect, have affected, can or will affect the abundance of a stock. So in the model, we integrate the input data. So we have the abundance goes into the model, information on trends, catches, and the stock structure. We integrate that into the model. We capture uncertainty. And what do we mean by that? Is that often we don't know for sure what the numbers we have are correct. So we test different numbers. We test whether, what if the abundance is a little bit higher than what we think, or what if the abundance is a little bit lower than what we think. And that's part of the process. And then we run our simulations and we finalize our results. So after that, So after that, we report, we reach our conclusions. We report what the population status is, or in other words, we try to estimate what the population level is relative to pre-exploitation abundance, or we try to, we determine whether the population is increasing, declining, whether we expect the population to continue increasing in face of existing threats, and so on and so forth. If there are concerns, we try to identify the key anthropogenic factors affecting the population, and also the most efficient mitigation measures. And then we finally, if applicable, we provide advice to the Conservation Committee, and we also provide advice on actions to the Commission. So that's in a simplified way what a population assessment conducted by the Scientific Committee looks like. Now, I want to go through definitions. I have people coming to me and asking, oh, the report has words like comprehensive assessment or in-depth assessment or implementation. What does that mean? So the definitions depend on two major factors, whether a population is subject to whaling or under the AWNP or INP, or whether a population is not subject to whaling. So for example, that phase of gathering information to evaluate whether an assessment is viable is called a pre-assessment for stocks that are not subject to whaling, and it's called a pre-implementation for species or stocks that are subject to whaling under the AWMP and the RMP. So the first assessment that we do with a species or stock is called a comprehensive assessment. For species or stocks that are not subject to whaling, and it's called an implementation for species or stocks that are subject to whaling. And finally, we call for a repeated assessment, we call an in-depth assessment or an implementation review. So the first time is comprehensive assessment or implementation. The subsequent assessments are in-depth assessments or implementation reviews, depending on whether populations are or not subject to whaling under the AWMP or RMP. And repetition is important. Repetition is important because the environment changes. The biological parameters from these populations change. As populations recover or decline, they will survive. The survival will change, the reproduction is going to change, the habitat is going to change. So it's important for us to redo assessments on some regular basis to make sure that our advice to the Commission remains valid for the circumstances that the populations are going through. So transferring to you, Robert.
Yeah, do you want to have questions or do we want to wait till?
Do you want to?
If you prefer, or you just continue.
Let's just go through.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll go through the whole presentation and open for questions at the end.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be here. It's good to see you all. It was pretty spectacular, the response that we received from many people asking us for additional information. And I was a little skeptical when Ryan and Andre kind of came up with this approach to have our presentation on Monday and then questions 2 days later. But it's worked really, really well. And as Alex said a moment ago, that it's because you all are interested in more information, and we do appreciate the questions that you've asked and the opportunity to try to answer those questions. So one of those questions was, how does IST, the implementation, thank you, the implementation review and simulation testing subcommittee, how does that one and Aboriginal subsistence whaling subcommittee, how do they interact? And very briefly, IST basically develops and tests the strike limit algorithm, and ASW reviews new information. And when they review information on abundance, they get that from ASI, the abundance, the status of stocks and international. Yeah, too many acronyms. I forget them sometimes. If we get information on stock structure from SD and DNA, it goes to ASW, and then catch, health, and other information. And so ASW reviews that information and provides its suggestion to IST, and similarly, IST provides its information about the strike limit algorithms, about tested parameter space or the current conditions as we expected them. And they work closely together to come up with management advice. So there's also a question on whether reporting is completed at ASW. And I think when I described it on Monday, I might have been a little misleading or misunderstood. But the answer is yes, that all of the countries involved in Aboriginal subsistence whaling have provided information about their catches over the last 4 years. Provided in many cases new information, and I think that all of the countries have also submitted descriptions of the hunt, which are on the website as well. And then our colleague from Greenland asked yesterday about how does the IWC incorporate indigenous knowledge or traditional ecological knowledge into our decision-making process. And from the scientific committee perspective, we have several different ways, and I've highlighted a few of them. It's certainly not a comprehensive list, but notably, the Aboriginal whaling scheme says that information from the harvest, the information from the catch, and the hunters, that information that comes from those sources may result in a special or early implementation review if the conditions are different than what we expected. Okay. Another part of the scheme is the second bullet there that says the value of traditional knowledge is also noted, and such information can also provide valuable input into conducting implementation reviews. Okay. So again, it's encouraging the submission of traditional knowledge as is possible, and the scientific committee values that kind of information and it influences what we do. So one example of that relates to the bowhead whale population survey. And in the late 70s and early 80s, we didn't have very good population estimates for bowhead whales in Alaska. And so Mayor Harry Brower Jr., sitting in the back there with the North Slope Borough and the Alaska Eskimo Whaling Commission, his father worked closely with a former boss of mine, Tom Albert, that many of you may remember Tom. And Harry said that the counters miss whales. There are some whales that are swimming out beyond where they can see, that not all the whales come right next to the ice edge is where we count from. And so Tom, working with other scientists, incorporated acoustic monitoring into the visual survey to come up with a correction factor for the whales that were beyond the area that the observers could see. So even though that was primarily an effort by the North Slope Borough and the Alaska Eskimo Whaling Commission, that the scientific committee reviews those methods and endorses them typically before they're used. Okay. And you can find in past scientific committee reports numerous acknowledgements of traditional knowledge and encouragement for the hunters to submit comments, submit observations as well. In Alaska, we help facilitate that. And for other Aboriginal countries, it may be worthwhile for the scientists that attend the SC to help facilitate providing that traditional knowledge or indigenous knowledge to the scientific committee as well. Shifting gears a little bit, we had some questions about in-depth assessments. Again, Alex described those for you all again today. And the question, though, was specific to Western North Pacific common minke whales. It asks if distribution and abundance may affect our management advice. And it asks if we were aware of changes in distribution and possibly abundance. So I'm going to answer the latter part of that sentence first. And to say that for Western North Pacific common minke whales, the scientific committee doesn't provide management advice. Okay, we don't provide management advice for that group of whales because no contracting governments at the IWC are hunting from that stock. Okay, we may provide insights through the in-depth assessment process that there's a problem with the population or a subpopulation, but we don't specifically provide management advice. So the scientific committee has been doing this in-depth assessment, started the in-depth assessment. Actually, they started an implementation review in 2019. And then after that, we switched to an in-depth assessment. And so they are reviewing all of the information that we have that's available on distribution, abundance, and other aspects of the new information from that group of whales. We also had a question about North Atlantic right whales, and they asked that question asked if we could provide more details about our recommendations, and so we have repeatedly expressed serious concern about North Atlantic right whales because that population is so small, about 340 individuals. Okay, it's declining and it's vulnerable, and a lot of the concern is related to human impacts from entanglement, ship strikes, and a variety of other things. So some of our stronger recommendations are encouraging the US and Canada, these whales occur in their waters, to try to reduce the entanglement and ship strikes to zero as soon as possible. Okay. We've also encouraged the US and Canada to work together since this population is moving across the border on occasion. And there's also an indication that these right whales are maybe going someplace new that we don't know about. So we've encouraged a better understanding of movements and range. We also had a question about North Pacific sei whales, and we're currently in the midst of a comprehensive assessment. And if you remember what Alex just said, this is the first assessment we've done for North Pacific sei whales. And so that's why it's a comprehensive assessment instead of in-depth assessment. And the question was about stock structure and the possible implications of harvest by Japan. Okay, so the SC has been working and discussing stock structure. They're developing a population model to make sure that the data that we have that goes into that model, that it all works right and gives us good information. And so there continues to be work on those input data and making sure that the model does what it's supposed to do. And so regarding the stock structure hypotheses, there's two. One is that there's a single population of sei whales in the entire North Pacific. It's just one population. And the other hypothesis is that there's 5 separate substocks. And then there's an area in the northern Gulf of Alaska where some of those stocks mix. The scientific committee said there's not a lot of evidence for the multiple stocks, that there's more evidence for the single stocks, but there's not compelling information to make a decision about whether one is right or wrong at this point. And so both stock structure hypotheses are part of this comprehensive assessment.
Thank you, Robert. We were asked the question about ship strikes and which areas have been identified for high risks and what are the recommended measures in these. And on the slide, you will see a map of the currently identified high risk areas and their current mitigation measure, which has been implemented, or if one is not implemented yet, what stage it is at. The ship strike strategic plan has more detailed information on each location, species of concern, and references supporting it being a high-risk area, and notes on the current progress of developing mitigation measures. Future support by the IWC includes developing a data access platform that will support user queries into the data, generate high-level summaries, and have data visualizations to explore. The goal will be to have increased use of the database and more data contributions to the database. And I'd like to thank Lydia O'Loughlin, who is partly funded by the Scientific Committee research budget to improve the ship strikes database and encourage any countries that collect such data to submit it to to our Lydia so she can get it into the database for you. And if you wish to speak to her, contact me and I'll give you her details. Next slide. At the SC68D, the scientific committee meeting that has just gone, CAMLAR representatives attended, and they provided details of 3 humpback whales that have been entangled in the krill fishery during the 2021 season. And there was then a further animal entangled in the 21-22 season. They were entangled in a continuous trawling net, where the net can be in the water for multiple days. CAMLAR sought advice to better understand the reasons for these events and to mitigate them in the future. The HIM subcommittee discussed this topic and observed that the whales were certainly taken whilst they were still alive, and likely entered the trawls when looking for food. The size of the animals suggested they were dependent or newly independent calves of the year. We formed an intercessional group to help provide further advice to understand the likely causes of the trawl structure, what factors likely contributed to the incidents, how future incidents should be investigated and what information should be collected, and determined routine data collection to put these bycatch incidents into context. This group produced a report which has recently been presented by Nat Kelly on behalf of that working group to the CAMLAR IMAF sub-working group between the 10th and the 14th of October. So we do have Martin Bew in the room, who was a member of that group, if you want to find out more information. Thank you. Nick.
Thank you. I would like to echo the thanks of Robert and Alex for all the questions that were submitted. We particularly enjoyed the 10 questions that arrived at 1 o'clock this morning. Was there a drafting group on the dance floor? Where did they come from? So we've had several questions or iterations of questions that have been asked more than once. So there were several on task teams and conservation management plans. So I'll try and summarise or try and address all those questions in 1 or 2 slides. So task teams. Task teams aim to provide rapid and targeted responses to situations where we're concerned about particular populations. Task teams provide urgent but informal support compared to the conservation management plans, which are a much higher level, sort of government level framework. The Vice Chair of the Conservation Committee explained in detail the conservation management plan process this morning. So I will just specifically respond to one question, which was what is happening with the Asian river dolphin CMP. Within the process of a CMP, there is a nomination, development, implementation, monitoring and review series of steps. And with the Asian river dolphin, which we've been talking about for about 2 years now, we are still trying to define how best to tackle multiple species across multiple jurisdictions. So we're at the pre-nomination phase for that particular mentioned or potential CMP, which has been mentioned in our reports for several years now. I was also asked what task teams specifically are active just now. There are 2 task teams, the Lahiles and the Susa Plumbea task teams. They report to the task team steering committee, and then the steering committee reports to the scientific committee on progress made with those task teams over the intersessional period. There has been different progress with the different task teams, and of course this depends on the complexity of the issue the task team is tackling. As a note, our first task team on the Franciscana then subsequently became a CMP, but this is not always the process or the purpose of a task team. Indeed, one of our task teams, the Asian river dolphin task team, was given a remit to review recommendations. and prioritise the recommendations that had been made to see which were current and which needed more work. And then that report actually went to CMS, which is now part of one of their concerted action plans.
Passing the microphone and the slide clicker back and forth here. As we've mentioned previously, the commission directed the scientific committee to conduct an ecosystem modeling effort to better understand the role of large cetaceans in the environments in the ecosystem. And I believe that was in 2016. And we were a little late getting started. And then the pandemic slowed us down even more. And we'd been intending to have an in-person workshop for quite a while. And finally, we decided we need to make some progress. So we ended up having a virtual workshop in 2021. And we made some progress there, and again at the scientific committee meeting this year. And there's 5 kind of topics that this group is working on. They're trying to investigate ecosystem models that are already existing and to figure out if they can be tweaked to better understand the role of cetaceans in the ecosystem. They're also looking for input information, what data are available to inform these models. And 2 components of that are related to whale poop. And does the feces from whale fertilize the top layer of the water? And does it promote productivity? The hypothesis is that it does. And there's also discussions about what happens to whale carcasses when they die. Obviously, they usually sink, and so they're transporting nutrients from the upper part of the water column down to the ocean floor. So those considerations are part of what this workshop or what this effort is looking at. There's also a need to understand how much food whales eat, how frequently they feed, and of course, it's equally important to understand how many whales are out there. That if we're going to do this big model, we need to know how much is being eaten, how much is being processed and put back into the water. There's also interest in looking at spatial and temporal differences, and one example of that is what were things like before commercial whaling and what are things like now? And are there differences that need to be accounted for in this modeling effort? So there's certainly focus on that. And there's also interest in trying to better understand how things are changing now with climate change in particular. So the anticipation is that this group will be able to have an in-person meeting in 2023, maybe even later this year. But that in-person workshop will really help that group kind of answer some of these questions and try to focus what they're doing and what the modeling may look like. There's kind of preliminary agreement that there should be an effort in the North Atlantic. And then in Southern oceans as well. So, of course, you'll receive more information about how that effort progresses here in the near future.
Thank you. We have also been asked what progress has occurred on the Strandings initiative. We had an excellent and very detailed summary from the Whale Killing Methods and Welfare report this morning. So I would just like to say that we have had a change in leadership within the various components of the Strandings initiative in the last few months. Fabio Luna has taken over as chair of the steering group. Andrew Brownlow has taken over as the chair of the Strandings expert panel. And we have a new Strandings coordinator within the Secretariat who was here earlier this week, Emma Neve Webb. I am part of the Eastern Stranding expert panel. And what we've striven to do over the last couple of years is to increase the membership of the Stranding's expert panel so that we literally have someone in every time zone so that we can deal with stranding matters as they happen on the ground. And part of this has been to add many scientists from Asia and Oceania to our group. We have a very active WhatsApp group. That's a fantastic way to respond to things in a timely manner on the ground. And in this last year alone, let me see, there's a list. We have responded to strandings in New Zealand, Australia, the US, the Indian Ocean, Ghana, and Taiwan. We have conducted our first online necropsies in that we were able to supervise and provide advice through camera and video input into some countries, into Cambodia, where we couldn't get people there on the ground due to the pandemic. But we've also been able to have some in-person training in the Arabian Peninsula. So the Stranding Initiative is progressing well. There is much information on the website. Please look there if you need more information. Thank you.
So we were also asked what had the scientific committee, or what has the scientific committee said about the South Atlantic Whale Sanctuary. And the South Atlantic Whale Sanctuary was reviewed by the scientific committee in 2016. You can find details of the review in the scientific committee report of that year, page 91, if you want to look at that. And the scientific committee reviewed the SAWS proposal, but also the SAWS management plan. And the committee concluded that the proposal was comprehensive. It noted that it had a management plan. It's the only sanctuary proposal presented to the IWC scientific committee with a management plan. That the performance, the management plan had measurable performance measures. The scientific committee also indicated that if the South Atlantic Whale Sanctuary is adopted by the Commission, that the implementation of the management plan should be developed in collaboration with the scientific committee. The committee also concluded that, in principle, the SAWS has the potential to foster international collaboration for research and monitoring of cetaceans. And it also concluded that the review by the scientific committee of the proposal and the management plan was adequate, and that no new review was needed if objectives of the SAWS did not change. And I will hand it to Lindsay again.
Thank you. So we were asked, how can you apply for the voluntary funds? Well, first of all, I want to say, if you want to know about progress and all the fantastic work the voluntary funds do, come to the event this evening, 7 p.m. in the Emerald Room. The scientific committee only deals with the Small Cetacean Voluntary Fund and the Southern Ocean Research Partnership Research Fund. The other three voluntary funds are dealt with either by Conservation Committee or through the Secretariat or through the ASW subgroup. So I will not talk to them. Oh, wrong one. There is, I'm not going to go through this, there is a fairly rigorous assessment for both the SORP and the Small Cetacean Fund, which is very similar to that, the same process that the research funds go through. Just with SORP and with SMALLS, we asked for those proposals earlier because there are far more applications for those funds than there are for the research funds within the scientific committee itself. For example, last year, the Small Cetacean Voluntary Fund received 56 project proposals, and there's no way we can assess them within a scientific committee meeting. Both SORP and SMALLS have a dedicated review panel that assess the funds, that assess each application. And there is a set of review criteria which we go through to score and grade those particular proposals. And what we are particularly keen to ensure that we do with all of our voluntary funds is that we are fulfilling the Commission's priority areas. All of this information is available on the website. It is a very transparent process, and I encourage you to look there if you wish more details. We were also, pardon me, we were also asked several times to update the Commission on, or to update you here today on the status of some of the small cetaceans. The vaquita in particular has been the focus of much attention within the scientific committee because of the grave concern we have for its continuing decline and the inability for any of our recommendations to be implemented in a timely or an effective manner. I have drawn out of our reports here the recommendations that we made in the last year. There are multiple recommendations on the vaquita, which you can get from the recommendation database. But as of this year, we are still concerned. The population is still decreasing, and the threat of gillnet entanglement is still the primary cause of mortality in that population. We, as we do in many of our reports and comments on this particular species, that we continue to provide, or that all efforts are made to continue to provide the best possible assessment of this particular population, and that it is imperative that the government of Mexico fully permit and fund the implementation of alternative fishing gears. We also spend some time discussing the Maui dolphin. This year, we received an update on the population number from a genetic mark and recapture program. And that number is 48 to 66 individuals aged 1 year or older. There are ongoing threats in the Maui dolphin habitat, and we were also asked to detail what progress on some of our recommendations. I'll hand the mic to you in a second. Ian, I just wanted to put here that this year, we again drew attention to the status of the Maui dolphin. We re-emphasise the issues of dealing with these very small populations in restricted habitats. And something newer, a newer recommendation is that currently the scientific committee is reviewing many of its recommendations to understand their effectiveness and impact. And the Maui dolphin will be one of those species that will have all of the recommendations reviewed within the next 1 or 2 years, depending on our resources and when we will be meeting again. Over to you, Ian.
Thank you, Lindsay. So at its two most recent meetings, the scientific committee agreed that given that management measures have already been implemented by New Zealand, the task for the committee is now to review the framework that was used to evaluate these measures. So to assist New Zealand with its future decisions regarding the threats to hectares and Maui dolphins. The review is to be in two parts, with a small intersessional group formed to nominate reviewers in the 4 different areas of the measures: spatial distribution, estimates of bycatch and vulnerability, and other threats, risk and model output. The idea would then be to hold a short pre-meeting to the next scientific committee meeting to evaluate the design and structure of the multi-threat risk assessment model, evaluate the overall sensitivity to model choices, data selection, uncertainties, or potential biases, and make recommendations to reduce key uncertainties and improve the utility of the model to inform management decisions. The Government of New Zealand has kindly offered to support this review, not only through financial support, but also through providing access to the data, the original computer code used, and to the relevant people involved.
We were also asked to provide a short update on the progress of the Small Cetacean Subcommittee's topic, aquatic wild meat. I would like to acknowledge the dedicated funding that the Government of the Netherlands provided to this particular topic, with which we were able to hold 3 regional workshops so that we could explore in more detail the particular issues in Africa, in South America, and also in Southeast Asia. Thank you, Netherlands. So we have now completed the series of workshops, and on the back of that, we worked with CMS and published a paper last year, which looked at the widespread use of megafauna. So we also included turtles and crocodiles, and how aquatic wild meat is used in the tropics and subtropics. Oh, aquatic wild meat, and that is the products derived from aquatic mammals and reptiles that are used for subsistence, food, traditional use, and trinkets, traditional medicine, that type of thing. Sorry, I forgot not everyone might know what aquatic wild meat was. So to progress with this topic, we have, and this is something that we want to do in person rather than try and attempt during a virtual scientific meeting, is to consolidate the findings of the 3 regional reports and to develop a work plan for this priority topic for the scientific committee as we move forward. So this is still a work in progress, but we feel we've made we've gained substantial new knowledge within this field, and we are collaborating with CMS, as this is also an important agenda item for their aquatic wild meat working group. We have been asked many questions about directed take of small cetaceans. We do have a long-standing recommendation that no small cetacean removals, live capture or direct harvest should be authorised until a full assessment of status has been made. In the last year, 2 species have been flagged with concern. That is the directed take of narwhals of Greenland. Our report highlights particularly that sustainable management is a priority for the human communities that rely on these hunts for subsistence. And we also noted that the management authority that provides guidance to the take of narwhals had reduced the hunt to 0. We were concerned to see that that hunting is still ongoing, particularly in southeast Greenland, and requested that this quota is reduced to 0 until we much better understand the impact of these takes on these populations. The second species that was brought to our attention was the Atlantic white-sided dolphin, when in 2021, the largest single drive hunt occurred for this species in the Faroes. For this particular species, we work closely with Azkabans, who have developed an intersessional working group on this particular genus, and we have an observer from IWC sits within that working group and within Azkabans to work on this issue and to try and better understand the impact of these takes from this population.
All right, shifting back to national reporting. As mentioned on Monday, that the submission of annual national reports is required by the convention in Article 8. And it says that contracting governments will submit scientific information about whales and whaling annually. Here's numbers from the last 2 years of how many national progress reports were actually submitted. Only 13 in 2022 and only 14 in 2021. And I don't know that the numbers were much better in the 2 or 3 or 4 years before that. So of course, that information that comes in the national progress reports is helpful, can be helpful to the scientific committee, and can be helpful to the IWC generally. make sure we're fully informed and we're using the full suite of information for providing advice, making our suggestions, recommendations. So the GDR subcommittee convened by Mike Double of Australia has been working closely with the Secretariat for quite a few years to make the submission of national progress reports much simpler and much more streamlined. And so it's becoming easier. So we again encourage all contracting governments to submit annual progress reports through the report. I don't know if it's a web page or a portal or something, but you can talk to the Secretariat or Mike and they can give you more details, but please submit progress reports.
Thank you. So another question that we received was a request to elaborate a little bit more on the communication initiative. And as we mentioned on Monday, the communication initiative is under development by the scientific committee to describe the work of the committee to the commission in a more effective manner. And we had a paper presented to the F&A subcommittee. The title of the paper is on the screen. The document is FA/68/7.2.2/01. The commission is welcome or invited to take a look at that paper again if more information is needed. And in that paper, there is a link to some more background information that was prepared by the steering committee that is developing the communication initiative. But the two main leaders in developing this initiative are Mike Double from Australia and Kate Wilson from the Secretariat. And I'd like to invite Mike to talk a little bit more about the initiative, if he wants. And also, Mike, if you want to make any comments about the progress reports, the national progress reports on the GDR, feel free to, given that Robert just presented that as well. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, SC Chair. While I'm an Australian delegate, I speak now as a member of the IWC Scientific Committee. I thank everyone for their interest in this communication initiative. And as Alex has said, I draw your attention to the paper on the screen now. And a link within that paper goes to the detailed description of the SC Communication Initiative. In brief, the Scientific Committee recognises that the Commission is the Scientific Committee's primary audience. The SC provide information to the Commission to guide the Commission's decisions. However, the SC recognises that most of its reporting material are not well tailored to the Commission audience. Our reports are very large, dense, often highly technical, and they expose our deep passion for acronyms such as IST, IWMP, ASW, AWS, RMP, SLA, GDAR. I could go on and on and on. As such, this SC Communication Initiative aims to develop communication products that will improve the SC's ability to communicate its work and its recommendations, to deliver key technical information to the Commission in an appropriate manner, to highlight concerns regarding the status of specific species and stocks, and importantly, encourage greater interaction between commissioners and the SC. And of course, we're already seeing that now. As stated in this paper, we intend to develop 4 primary products. These are the presentation of our progress to the Plenary of Commission, a scientific committee summary document summarizing our progress over the biennial period, to have an impartial science hub in the margins of the plenary, and to produce digital fact sheets which will explain key SC topics and products, such as strike limit algorithms and the revised management procedure. Importantly, we wish to improve our ability to deliver products in languages other than English, and in particular in French and Spanish. We will endeavour to ensure we have scientists who are able to communicate in non-English languages to participate in the Science Hub, and we will produce fact sheets in multiple languages. While the SC communication will be officially launched at IWC69, through the leadership of Robert Saddam, Alex Sabini, Lindsay Porter, we have already taken effective steps here at IWC68 that improves the accessibility and visibility of the work of the scientific committee. I am grateful to the SC chairs, the Communication Initiative Steering Group, and importantly to Kate Wilson from the Secretariat for conceiving and developing this initiative. The chairs of the SC and I very much welcome ideas and feedback from all attendees of IWC68 in regards to presenting the work of the scientific committee to the Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Ian asked me to talk about GDR and National Progress Report, so off, to you, Ian, or Ian.
Thank you, Alex. I just wanted to add, if countries have data and they're unsure how to get it to the Secretariat, just contact us. In recent years, Musa, who is a database wizard, has sat down with country representatives and worked with them to get their data in. By doing this, it helps us understand the problems that you face getting your data to us and can help us redesign the platforms to make it as easy as possible for you in 3 languages.
Thank you, Ian. And just the next question is that as everyone knows, the Commission is facing financial difficulties, and we are now currently talking about what we can do to balance the budget of the Commission. And so one of the questions that came up was whether the scientific committee had made recommendations or discussed what to do if we had budget cuts. And I want to point everyone to a document that was written by the scientific committee chairs and a number of scientific committee members in 2021. This is Annex K of the 2021 report. It should be available to everyone online. And the document describes implications and consequences of further cuts to the scientific committee budget or changes in the scientific committee meeting structure. So everyone is welcome to pull that out and take a look if they're interested. But essentially, obviously, we would like to continue meeting annually. We feel that given the agenda that we have right now, only annual meetings will give us the time to effectively and timely deliver what is being asked to us at this stage. But obviously, we are aware that this might not be possible. And then if biennial meetings are required, the committee requested, or at least indicated, that holding in-person workshops in intervening years would be a good way forward. These workshops would focus on the highly technical subgroups, those providing management advice with respect to Aboriginal whaling, IST, IA, the abundance group, and the group dealing with stock definition and stock structure. Obviously, it has been discussed this before. We should give priority to ASW related topics, to Aboriginal subsystem whaling related topics. And it would be desirable also to hold virtual meetings for the other SC groups that could not meet in person in the intervening years. We also highlighted that if we're going into biennial meetings, it's very likely that we're going to have to reduce our agenda. And we request once again guidance from the commission on what items in the agenda we need to prioritize. And also wanted to mention that as part of this process, the scientific committee established a group called, we're calling a budget group, that will help the scientific committee to move into a different meeting schedule and a different budget. We're having a different budget. That group is formed by the scientific committee chair and vice chair, a number of previous chairs, and a number of national delegates from the different countries. And we will be working as soon as we hear from the commission what instructions are with respect to meeting schedule and budget. And finally, there was a question about how to engage with the scientific committee, and we are here to talk to everyone. Lindsay, myself, and Ian, and Robert too, for at least a few more days.
Hours.
Okay, a few more hours. Are open to talk to all of you at any time about any topic. Please reach out to us. And if you can reach out to us in person, the SC questions email will remain active. You can email SC questions, and the email is being forwarded directly to my personal email, Lindsay's personal email, and Ian. So we will be able to get back at you. And I think that's all that we had. I just wanted, well, first I wanted to again thank everybody for the feedback that we got during this meeting. It was great interacting with many of you. Please keep ideas coming, suggestions coming. We're all happy to address those. And then reiterate and thank both of you, Mr. Chair, and the Chair of FNA, Ryan, for this new idea of having discussions of the scientific committee split into two parts. Like Robert said, I was also a little bit skeptical, but I think we have to recognize that it worked really well. So we would like to acknowledge your leadership on that because it was very, very productive. And I think we're open to questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex, Robert, Lindsay, Ian, for a very informative and excellent presentation on a large number of complex and highly specific topics. I think the scientific committee did this really with a huge array of those topics. So you're already on a good way to this communication initiative. And with this, we go to the next step in our agenda, which is discussion of the scientific committee report. And I open the floor for contracting governments. Please, the floor is yours. Czech Republic.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and sorry for being first again. The Czech Republic, speaking on behalf of the EU and its member states party to the ICRW, would first and foremost of all like to congratulate the preceding and present chairs and vice chairs of the scientific committee for their excellent way of presenting 4 years of exemplary research. Under normal circumstances, this is a very challenging task, but due to the COVID-19 pandemic, having to present 4 years of work, this was an almost impossible task. However, not only was the format of presenting this information very clear, it was also an incredibly interesting means to relay very technical information to our commissioners, some of whom have a less technical background. In this regard, we warmly welcome the communications initiative led by Australia and ably supported by the Secretariat, intended to improve the communication of the crucial work of the Scientific Committee to the Commission and beyond. We would also highly recommend the presentation to be shared as it provides an extensive overview of the work of the Scientific Committee in a manner that is accessible to a lay audience. The many valuable inputs and recommendations of the Scientific Committee allow the Commission to make informed, science-based decisions on the conservation and management of cetaceans. The Scientific Committee is internationally recognized as the authority for cetacean science. It is important to maintain this crucial role. We would like to give some concrete examples of this. We greatly appreciate the support given to our Spanish colleagues on solitary dolphin and Gibraltar straight killer whale interactions with vessels. It is comforting to the member countries to be able to count on the support of the Scientific Committee's expertise when managing human activities impacting cetaceans on a local level. We are also impressed with the results of outreach to other international organizations, the moving of shipping claim to protect sperm whales as one of the most prominent achievements, and stress the importance of optimizing synergies and avoiding duplication of work. We also applaud the work on strandings and the expert advisory panel on strandings, providing hands-on advice in strandings events globally. During your presentation, we noted with concern how the effects of climate change are becoming more and more prominent. We welcome the Joint Scientific and Conservation Committee's initiative of convening a virtual workshop on climate change in an effort to understand how this threat is affecting cetaceans, their prey, and their habitat, and I welcome any further work done on this issue. Noting the new work stream as agreed by the Conservation Committee. Additionally, we would like to express our interest in further work by the Scientific Committee on the following issues. The improvement of status of global whale populations is a clear indicator of the effect of IWC's decision-making, and therefore we support the planned monitoring efforts. We welcome the contribution of the broader public to photo identification work through citizen science. We encourage the Scientific Committee to retain this innovative approach and further consider more efficient and cost-effective monitoring techniques like acoustic sensors and satellite remote sensing to assist in the study and assessment of cetaceans population. We note the important work of the Aboriginal Subsistence Whaling Subcommittee, providing essential scientific advice for strike limit algorithms and quota renewals for Aboriginal subsistence whaling, as well as the important work of the human-induced mortality and environmental concern subcommittees that are addressing important issues like bycatch, ship strikes, pollution, and climate change. As proponents of plastic marine resolution, we are happy to observe several work streams of the Scientific Committee that can contribute to this issue. We also express our support to the Scientific Committee's work on underwater noise, and in this regard, we wish to highlight the rapid developments in the field of offshore energy. The EU and its member states party to the convention are committed to contributing actively to the Scientific Committee's deliberation and share our experience on offshore energy. We also welcome the work done by the subcommittee on small cetaceans, as it provides key advice on issues where these animals are threatened. We observe with concern the IWC's current financial situation. We are worried that the work of the Scientific Committee might be affected negatively by the forcing budget cuts, despite its increasing agenda. In this regard, we support the initiative of the Budgetary Subcommittee presenting a long-term plan for the sustainability of the Scientific Committee's finances. We hope to be able to find a balanced solution incorporating all work streams of the IWC, including the new structure recommended by the Working Group on Operational Effectiveness. As prioritization will be necessary, it is of utmost importance that sufficient funds are allocated to the crucial research tasks related to Aboriginal subsistence whaling. We need to maintain the integrity of this organization, and the research and science-based evidence must we use to underpin our decisions. Finally, Chair, we would like to thank Dr. Robert Sudan, the former Scientific Committee Chair, for his leadership during the challenging times of pandemic, ensuring that the scientific committee proceeded with its work under such difficult circumstances. Thank you very much, Robert. And thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Austria, followed by New Zealand.
Austria wishes, as she has done in the past, to individually address the issue of the vaquita. Specifically, Austria wishes to comment on the slide regarding the vaquita. Arguably, the IWC's main task is to prevent extinctions. And so the scientific committee's main recommendation in this case cannot be, as perhaps suggested by the slide, that more research is necessary. At some point, research must give way to immediate common sense measures. Some of these are outlined in the full SC report, but I think we all here know what those measures, those common sense measures should be. And most of them go beyond the remit of the scientific committee. Otherwise, I fear, my fellow delegates, that we will all be sitting here with long faces in the near future and with real shame. Thank you.
Thank you. New Zealand, followed by UK.
Thank you, Chair. New Zealand joins others to thank the Scientific Committee for its work and for the presentations. As a non-scientist, I really value the clear and non-jargon approach to the presentations. So to the question the former chair of the Scientific Committee asked on Tuesday, you asked for feedback on the way you present your science, and I say fantastic. And we did spot the photo of Paul McCartney on the photo board. New Zealand strongly supports the work of the Scientific Committee. I don't propose to go into detail here on the various programs we support, but I did want to specifically highlight the small cetaceans and in particular concerns for the Maui dolphin. New Zealand remains very concerned about the critically endangered Maui dolphin. My government is committed to ensuring the long-term viability of these dolphins. Risks to the dolphins are managed through the New Zealand government Hectares and Maui Dolphin Threat Management Plan. This plan sets out a range of long-term protection measures informed by the best available scientific information. The Threat Management Plan was most recently reviewed 2 years ago in 2020. This has led to expanded, extensive set net and trawl fishing spatial closures. Over 31,000 square kilometres of coastal waters in New Zealand are now closed to set net fishing, and there are over 12,000 square kilometres of trawl measures in place. New Zealand welcomes the Scientific Committee's independent review of the science informing the New Zealand Hector and Maui Dolphin Threat Management Plan. At the Scientific Committee's request, New Zealand has agreed to provide the IWC with funds for the independent review so that it is not a call on the Scientific Committee's budget in these constrained financial times. We look forward to the commencement of the independent Scientific Committee review. Thank you.
Thank you. UK, followed by the US.
Thank you, Chair. And firstly, like others, I'd like to start by thanking all those involved in the communication initiative for the Scientific Committee. Again, we found the presentations from the Scientific Committee leadership informative, clear, and incredibly useful in understanding all of the excellent work the Scientific Committee does. Thank you for making such complex tasks so accessible and easy to understand. And we're really encouraged by all the work done on this to date and welcome further intersessional work on this. I wanted to also just draw attention to a couple of specific recommendations from the Scientific Committee report and extremely helpful presentations today relating to small cetaceans. Firstly, we note the committee recommended the government of Greenland immediately reduce the quota for southeast Greenland hunt of narwhals to 0. in response to the imminent risk to that population. We remain concerned that catch quotas established in 2022 may still be in place. Secondly, we also remain concerned by small cetacean hunts in the Faroe Islands, noting the advice of the scientific committee that, quote, no small cetacean removals should be authorized until a full assessment of the status of this dolphin population has been undertaken, close quotes. In both cases, we note the scientific committee's concern and recommendation that the Secretariat write a letter to convey these concerns to the relevant authorities. Finally, whilst we recognise that Japan is not a party to the ICRW, we remain very concerned that in addition to commercial whaling operations, a large number of small cetaceans are also taken in Japanese coastal waters. We respectfully ask that Japan undertakes a status review of the species targeted in the hunts, and we appreciate any action that Japan may be undertaking to improve the welfare of those animals hunted. Thank you.
Thank you. US followed by India.
Thank you, Chair. And while I appreciate the acknowledgement, I think the successful implementation of this new format is entirely due to the clear, the concise, and the thorough presentations that you have given, as well as the extensive amount of time and attention that you gave delegations here in the margins of this meeting. And I can speak to that because I was one of those delegates, and I appreciated your patience with those who had questions and greatly appreciated your time. On behalf of the United States, I commend you and thank you for these presentations, both today and on day one. I did want to note we agreed with one of your last slides there regarding the priorities for the committee if we do go to biennial meetings, and can fully support the rest of your report and its recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. India followed by Norway.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to commend the extensive work done by the scientific committee and the wide breadth of knowledge addressed by the various subcommittees. We are pleased to say that India has completed the range-wise population estimations of riverine dolphins and has taken scientific river rejuvenations program for biodiversity enrichment. The Government of India recently released Marine Megafauna Stranding guidelines aim to improve the coordinations between the various independent government, rescue teams responding to marine strandings, research and management, and data sharing, which will assist with the long-term conservation of various marine species and their habitats. We'll be more happy to collaborate on these aspects of furthering the scientific data gaps for effective conservations. Another aspect of current need is evaluating meta-populations connectivity of marine cetaceans across our oceans. We need technological interventions to undertake genetic sampling that would give a holistic perspective on the current status of the cetaceans across our oceans and rivers, especially focusing not only the hot spots, but also cold spots, which disrupts connectivity. Scientific surveys are already underway in India to map these cold spots. Connectivity will be the key to prevent and halt otherwise imminent extinctions. Therefore, we propose multi-country regional teams and collaborations with local research institutions to undertake coordinated research in population monitoring, conservation, scientific management, and alternate livelihood generations. Finally, we would like to reiterate our commitment to inclusivity and equal representations of all the relevant stakeholders in these discussions, which is currently missing. Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam is a Sanskrit sloka, means the world is one family, which substantiates that the well-being of all live beings is our responsibility, mitigation necessity, and helping in reducing the climatic vulnerability. Thank you.
Thank you. Norway followed by Guinea.
Thank you, Chair. First, I will congratulate the leadership of the scientific committee with two very, very good presentations. And then I will comment on one of the most pressing conservation issues we are dealing with currently, and that's the vaquita. And the handful of remaining vaquitas live in a very small area in a relatively pristine environment in the upper Gulf of California. And there is only one major threat to this species, and that is entanglement in illegal gill nets. Norway is very disappointed that despite decades of advice from the Scientific Committee and the Silva Committee, the government of Mexico has not been able to stop this illegal gill net fishery in the small area occupied by the vaquita. If the ban on gill net is not implemented immediately, vaquitas will be extinct in the very near future. However, calves were observed in 2019, so the few remaining vaquitas might have the potential for recovering the population if the illegal gill net fishery is stopped immediately. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Guinea, followed by Switzerland.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. À l'instar de ceux qui ont parlé avant moi, je voudrais remercier les membres de notre comité scientifique. Nous apprécions hautement la complexité des travaux qui sont réalisés par les membres de ce comité. Et nous apprécions la valeur des résultats obtenus. Aujourd'hui, nous invitons à faire de ces résultats la boussole pour la prise de décision que nous prenons ici. Parlant des petits cétacés, je profite pour informer que mon pays, la République de Guinée, dans le cadre d'un programme soutenu par la COMAFAT avec l'assistance technique de chercheurs japonais, développe un programme de campagne de recherche visuelle de cétacés. Nous disposons d'une banque de données et dans le cadre de contrat que nous allons signer entre la CBI et la COMAFAT, ces données pourront être transférées à notre comité scientifique. Ce que je voudrais en plus proposer, que notre Centre national de sciences halieutiques serve de point d'appui pour la diffusion des résultats de notre comité scientifique de la CBI. Également, que ce centre serve de relais pour l'encadrement et la formation des chercheurs africains. Je vous remercie.
Thank you. Switzerland, followed by Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The scientific committee, in our view and the view of Switzerland, is by all means the best part of the IWC. That's something we said repeatedly in the past. There you have people working, doing, acting, something that sometimes is missed in the rest of the IWC. And I could echo most of the speakers before. I would just pick up what the commissioner from Norway said related to the vaquita. I mean, the scientific committee can give the best advice. If the politicians are acting, then as proposed by the scientific committee, even the best advice is for nothing. And that's very sad. And I hope that in the future, at least, people are listening more to the advice given by the scientific committee to avoid that we have maybe more species going into a situation as we have it for the vaquita. Thank you.
Thank you. Denmark, followed by Mexico.
Thank you. The Kingdom of Denmark's delegation to the IWC includes representatives from the 3 countries within the kingdom, Denmark, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands. Management of natural resources is one of the many policy areas being managed separately in the 3 countries. This is also the case when it comes to whaling. This being said, Denmark, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands all acknowledge IWC's important role in the management of large whales. It is taking point of departure in this joint position that we are here together representing the Kingdom of Denmark. We also all take note that the IWC does not have competence in managing hunting and catching of small cetaceans. However, following the UK intervention, referring to a particular catch of white-sided dolphins in the Faroe Islands, the Faroese member of the Kingdom of Denmark delegation, Mr. Paul Nolsø, will share a few insights that we hope will be useful.
Thank you. First, let me use the opportunity on behalf of the government of the Faroe Islands to emphasize that the mentioned catch of 1,423 white-sided dolphins in Skálafjørður the 12th of September 2021 was an exceptional incident, and this was by far the largest catch of white-sided dolphins in the history of the Faroe Islands. It is the position of the Faroese government that such large catches should be avoided. To avoid any further unmanageable catches such as that which occurred in September 2021, the Faroese government has implemented an annual catch limit of 500 white-sided dolphins. The Faroe Islands have a strong commitment to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals number 14 to conserve and sustainable use of the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. The government of the Faroe Islands underlines the right and responsibility of the Faroese people to utilize the resources of the sea sustainably. The Faroe Islands have been a member country of NAMCO, the North Atlantic Marine Mammal Commission, since it was founded in 1992. NAMCO provides member countries with advice and recommendation on conservation, management, and sustainable use of marine mammals in the North Atlantic. In the Faroe Islands, pilot whales and other small whales represent one of the few local resources of meat that does not have to be imported from afar. The meat from each whale drive provides valuable food with low carbon footprints, which is distributed for free in the local communities where the whales drive takes place. In the Faroe Islands, we consider it both economically and environmentally responsible to make the most use of local natural resources, including whales, to maintain the knowledge required to make use of what nature provides in a harsh oceanic environment. Regarding the mentioned catch of white-sided dolphins in September 2021, the Faroese government has acknowledged that there are aspects of that catch were not satisfactory. In particular, the unusual large number of dolphin kills. This made procedures difficult to manage and is unlikely to be a sustainable level of catch on a long-term annual basis. The latest scientific estimate for white-sided dolphins put the stock at around 80,000 in the seas around the Faroe Islands. Based on this, an annual catch of 525 white-sided dolphins would be well within the sustainable limit. Since the turn of the century, the annual catch of the Faroe Islands has been 260 on average. Nevertheless, the Faroe Islands have requested the Scientific Committee of NAMCO to provide an update and a comprehensive advice on sustainable catches of white-sided dolphins. This advice is expected to be available at the latest by 2024, which after the government will receive and will review the provincial annual limit of 500. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. As there was also raised a couple of questions related to Greenland, I hope that the chairman will allow that I also hand over the floor to Amalie Jessen, the Greenlandic representative. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Let me thank the Scientific Committee for an interesting report. And the government of Greenland, in its decision-making processes, looks into both scientific advice, but also on hunting knowledge, local hunting knowledge. And both have also given responses, both the science and the hunters, in the decision for the 2022 quota on narwhals in East Greenland. The government of Greenland have also obligation to secure fresh meat, and in this process, they have decided to put limited quota of narwhals in Southeast Greenland. I would like to emphasize that marine mammals have special importance for the society. The communities cannot live without marine mammals. Marine mammals are our food, identity, and culture. Let me name a few examples of solemn principles. The International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights of 1966. It says that all peoples may freely dispose of the natural wealth and resources, and that in no case may a people be deprived of its own means of subsistence. Here we are dealing with very limited numbers of inhabitants in East Greenland. They are very dependent on especially narwhal in the area. There are only 11 persons that have, we call it full-time hunters, and they are in an area that are very big, but they need fresh food, especially when the imported food is very, very, very expensive. Let me also mention the Rio Declaration from Earth Summit in 1992, which says that unilateral trade policy measures to deal with environmental challenges outside the jurisdiction of the importing country should be avoided. We have seen that many, many times, that we are limited in our way of living, and especially that the hunters are impacted, as I may say. The third one I want to mention is the UN's second Sustainable Development Goal, Stop Starving, which is very relevant here. The government of Greenland cannot accept people to be, only to buy Western food, which may not be healthy and not very good in the area of very low and cold winters. So the food around the communities is the right food. Of course, we are aware of the biological advice, but we have also hunters' knowledge to take into account in the decision-making processes. Thank you.
Thank you. We are already in a coffee break, and we have still, in my estimates, half an hour before we can conclude on this agenda item. So I would, for the moment, adjourn this agenda item, and I would also tend to adjourn the session for the coffee break. What I want to do, I'll check in the coffee break, either immediately when we start the session or when we close this agenda item, is to briefly reopen agenda items that were adjourned regarding schedule amendment, budget, and resolutions, so that proponents can inform us of the progress. But as said, I would tend to do this after the coffee break. I hope you're fine with this. So let us adjourn now. The list of speakers will remain recorded. So after we again start on discussion of the scientific reports, you will be given the opportunity to speak in the same order as you have requested. So enjoy your coffee. We are at the agenda item 13.2, which is discussion of the scientific committee report. And please pass the floor to Mexico, followed by Brazil.
Gracias, señor presidente. Me quiero unir como todos los países que han pedido la palabra hasta ahora en felicitar al comité científico y su excelente presentación. Y fui testigo de la dedicación y el cuidado que tuvieron para prepararla y poderla transmitir su trabajo con tanta claridad. En esta presentación pudimos atestiguar que la labor científica que lleva el comité científico está involucrado en prácticamente todas las tareas de la comisión. Entonces, tenemos que cuidar que este trabajo se siga haciendo para que pueda funcionar la IWC. Quiero mencionar también que nuestro comité ya ha tenido una enorme influencia, no solo en el desarrollo de métodos de evaluación de stocks de cetáceos, y como lo señalamos también cuando estuvo aquí Greg, en estimar la incertidumbre en estas evaluaciones, sino también esta influencia se ha extendido para evaluar poblaciones de otras especies. Como lo mencionaron unos y también lo mencionó Greg cuando estuvo aquí, la joya de la corona de la CBI es el comité científico. Y queremos que siga siendo. Para ello, tenemos que hacer todos nuestros esfuerzos para mantener las condiciones que le permitan desarrollar su trabajo. Nuestro agradecimiento a los presidentes, a los conveners, a los científicos del comité, a Roberto por todo el trabajo que ha hecho y porque es un pionero en desarrollar reuniones por Zoom, porque creo que fue de los primeros a nivel mundial que tuvo que soplarse una reunión de esta magnitud utilizando el Zoom, y creo que está haciendo un manual o una guía para que la puedan usar en otros lados. Quisiera agradecer las expresiones de preocupación de Austria, Noruega y Suiza. Puedo decir, Arne tiene autoridad en decir lo que dice porque fue presidente del subcomité de pequeños cetáceos cuando se vio la parte de vaquita y es miembro del Comité Internacional para la Recuperación de la Vaquita. Una lección que tenemos que aprender es que uno no puede retrasar o aplazar las acciones de conservación durante décadas y décadas, y cada administración se la pasa a la siguiente, como decimos en México, se están pasando la bolita, porque se pueden presentar eventos inesperados. Y en nuestro caso se vino de repente una demanda brutal por la vejiga natatoria de la totuaba, un pez ciánido que puede medir 2 metros y pesar 100 kilos, que se utiliza en la medicina tradicional china. Y eso atrajo al crimen organizado de China y de México. Y entonces, si uno no hace su tarea y aplaza las decisiones difíciles, se pueden presentar estas condiciones, y esta administración le ha tocado lidiar con una parte que es bastante complicada de desenredar, pero la información científica que tenemos de los últimos artículos que hemos publicado indican que la población se puede recuperar. Entonces, eso es todo por el momento, y otra vez deseo agradecer al comité científico y a mis 3 amigos que están sentados ahí enfrente por su trabajo. Gracias.
Thank you. Brazil, followed by Argentina.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I associate myself to the words of other commissioners in praise of the work of the scientific committee, not only in volume, but in quality in these last years. As our colleague from Mexico has just remembered, the scientific committee is very much at the core of IWC. I would very briefly, there were so many aspects you could make reference to,
but I'd highlight almost at random two aspects. There were two things that were mentioned. One of them, the work done regarding small cetaceans. I've had the pleasure of hearing Lindsay about this before. We follow with interest the experiences out of our region, such as the case of New Zealand. And small cetaceans has become a theme of special importance for Brazil in the IWC, both at the SC and at the Conservation Committee. And I also join my non-scientist colleagues who have mentioned it. It is important, very important, this work to improve communication and not only to render things easier for us mere mortals, non-scientists, but in the case of Brazil, it helps, and I'm sure it will help more and more with new initiatives in this sense. In internal communication, it'll help us better interact with the IWC and better to internalize things that are decided here. Of course, I would not be allowed not to mention, not to reiterate Brazil's interest in keeping the SC as financially robust as possible in this transitional phase of hygienization, to lend the words of my Australian colleague, hygienization of the whole commission. We very much understand it. It is obviously something of primary importance. But in this context, we join other countries in stressing the importance to keep the budget of the scientific committee on a pair level with what is expected of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Argentina, followed by Panama.
Gracias, señor presidente. Deseo en primer lugar agradecer a Robert, Alex y Nancy por su gran trabajo y por supuesto a los conveners, los miembros del comité científico y también a la secretaría. Por supuesto que al igual que otros reconocemos el alto grado de reconocimiento que tiene el comité y por esto debemos asegurarnos que cuente con los recursos necesarios para justamente mantener sus acciones. En el caso de los pequeños cetáceos, nos preocupan las capturas que se llevan a cabo sobre estas especies y quisiera solo reiterar como el comité científico lo ha expresado en diversas ocasiones, que antes de llevar adelante las mismas se lleven a cabo los estudios correspondientes de las poblaciones. Deseo también reconocer la compleja situación que enfrenta el gobierno de México en la conservación de la vaquita y solicitamos que utilice todos los recursos a su disposición para evitar la extinción de esta especie. Desde el Grupo Buenos Aires vemos con optimismo la estrategia de colocación de los dispositivos disuasorios a la pesca con redes en el área de tolerancia cero y solicitamos al Gobierno de México que por favor brinde información de los resultados de la efectividad de estos dispositivos, los cuales podrían ser de utilidad para su aplicación en otras regiones con problemáticas similares. Finalmente, deseo agradecer a Robert por su liderazgo en todos estos años y en particularmente atravesando la difícil situación de la pandemia que hemos vivido. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you. Panama.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Hacemos eco de los agradecimientos y las felicitaciones al Comité Científico por todos los esfuerzos y la labor que han realizado en tiempos difíciles y a pesar de los recortes presupuestarios. Sabemos que comunicar ciencia no es fácil, pero ustedes lo han hecho de una manera extraordinaria en esta presentación. Por lo tanto, apoyamos el reporte que han presentado y recordamos que sin investigación no hay gestión y manejo. Ustedes son nuestra columna vertebral. Sin sus consejos y recomendaciones no sería posible tomar decisiones. Muchas gracias por esto y de esta manera debemos garantizar las condiciones adecuadas y los recursos para que su trabajo continúe. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. I have no contracting governments on my list, so next one is non-member observers, so non-member government. No, IGOs, no, NGOs. Please put the list to the give the mic to the first one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This intervention is made by Whale and Dolphin Conservation on behalf of 18 fellow observer NGOs, of which will of course provide a full list to the Secretariat for the inclusion in the record of this meeting. We'd really like to thank the Scientific and Conservation Committees for all their hard and dedicated work intersessionally, and in particular welcome the work of both committees on ecosystem functioning. New information has come to light since the 2016.3 and 2018.2 resolutions that further strengthens the importance of whales and small cetaceans to the healthy functioning of marine ecosystems and the global climate. As noted by the work of the Scientific and Conservation Committees, cetaceans perform critical functions, including active cycling of nutrients such as iron, phosphorus, and nitrogen, and also contributing to the fixation and subsequent storage and sequestration of carbon. The nutrients they circulate increase productivity of phytoplankton, the main food source of zooplankton, and that in turn sustains the life of wider biodiversity, indeed many thousands of species, including healthy populations of commercial fish. And within the context of the climate and biodiversity crises, we're at a critical juncture for the future survival of the majority of species on Earth, including ourselves. We must restore all natural processes that have given rise to the conditions of the Holocene, which has allowed human civilization to flourish. This means allowing whale and dolphin populations to flourish, which will in turn help countries to meet their climate objectives and increase the resilience of nature, which has multifaceted positive impacts for humans. We call for the moratorium to be upheld and for urgent radical action to reduce the burgeoning threats impacting whales and dolphins, which reduce their ability to recover to pre-exploitation levels as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Please pass the floor to the second NGO.
Thank you, Chair. I'm making this intervention on behalf of Environmental Investigation Agency and 16 observer NGOs. A full list of organisations will be provided to the Secretariat to include in the record. Whilst I have the floor, we would like to belatedly thank the Conservation Committee for its important and dedicated work, and to wholeheartedly thank the Mexican Commissioner for his leadership as Conservation Committee Chair. We look forward to working with the UK and Argentina as Chair and Co-Chair going forward. Given the breadth and importance of the Conservation Committee's work, we strongly request that the Conservation Committee continues to meet annually to enable it to fulfil its mandate. We're also grateful to the Scientific Committee for their valuable work over the last 4 years, and to the chairs for their clear and thorough presentations today. Specifically on bycatch, we would like to thank the bycatch coordinators, the BMI and others involved in efforts to prevent bycatch, including for vulnerable and endangered species such as Franciscana, the Baltic harbour porpoise, and all species of humpback dolphins. We would particularly like to thank the Belgian Commissioner, Stephanie Langerock, for her leadership as Chair, and we want to welcome Anne-Marie Svoboda, the Netherlands Commissioner, as the new Chair of the Bycatch Standing Working Group. In this intervention, we would like to draw your attention to the populations of critically endangered vaquita and Maui dolphin. Both vaquita and Maui dolphins are declining and close to extinction.
The Scientific Committee has made a number of recommendations with the aim to prevent cetacean bycatch in both populations for many years, as we've just seen in the Chair's presentation. Scientific Committee recommendations include the requirement to remove all gill nets, and in the case of Maui dolphins, trawls too, from their critical habitats. Current protection measures for vaquita and Maui dolphins are not preventing declines in these populations. So we call on contracting governments concerned to enact the recommendations of the Scientific Committee and to ensure full area-based protection to remove all gill nets from the habitats of both these and other critically endangered populations. Thank you.
Thank you. Please pass the floor to the next NGO.
KNABK Greenland. We strongly object to the motion to recommend on narwhals and belugas in East Greenland due to the fact that the North Atlantic Marine Mammals Conservation Organization is the rightful organization where the small citations within the Northeast Atlantic is being worked under. The NAMCO has initiated a work to include traditional knowledge in their consultation with the traditional knowledge as ours in their survey and consultation prior to the scientific work conducted by NAMCO in a very comprehensive manner under guidance with ICES and other international bodies to assure that the scientific work is conducted in accordance with the best practice. We strongly urge IWC Scientific Committee to include the user knowledge in their work to submit a more pragmatic approach in their scientific work. I salute the work you do, but without including the traditional knowledge that consists not only of history, but a vast information and knowledge of how the nature and the animals function in the nature is vital. For that, we invite you to include us prior to your scientific surveys that you conduct. By including traditional knowledge, you get a broader sense and understanding of how the animals live. For instance, the narwhals and belugas are migratory species strongly submitted to the ice, and because of the climate change, the ice has receded and it follows the streams where the ice is, which is the reason why the abundance of narwhals and belugas have moved their migratory routes in East Greenland. Without the local knowledge and experience, the scientists would think that the animals are near extinction. This is not the case. If we have been submitted to some consultation, you would probably have been guided to learn where the migration routes and whereabouts of those animals would be in such a vast country like Greenland. East Greenland consists of several thousand kilometers of coastline, and only 7 communities are in East Greenland. And if you compare it with other countries, you can't measure it because of the small density of the people living in East Greenland. All those information would be available for you if you have included us in your terrific scientific work. Thank you.
Thank you. Please the floor to the 4th NGO.
Thank you, Chair. This intervention is by ProWildlife on behalf of 21 NGOs, of which I have provided the names in written to the Secretariat. We welcome the substantial work of the Scientific Committee on Small Cetaceans and especially refer to section 16.1 and 16.2 in its report, which is small cetacean use as aquatic wild meat, and review directed takes and live captures of small cetaceans. We fully support the concerns of the Scientific Committee on the narwhal hunt in Southeast Greenland, a population of imminent risk of extirpation. The committee and even NAMCO recommended the government of Greenland immediately reduce the quota to 0. While we thank Greenland for its remarks, we would like to ask for clarification what is meant with a limited number of narwhals taken. With regard to the Faroe Islands, we also note the public statement to the IWC by the EU and its member states that are parties to the IWC, which is document IWC-CCG 1488. And this is a citation from the statement, condemning the hunt of more than 1,420 white-sided dolphins in September 2021, and calling upon the Faroese government to immediately stop the outdated practice of whale and dolphin hunt. A reduction to a quota of 500 dolphins does not solve the problem, and we ask for clarification whether this quota is for white-sided dolphins or for unspecified dolphins. We further wish to express our serious concerns regarding the annual intentional take of approximately 100,000 small cetaceans worldwide. Typically, these are unsustainable, unregulated, or even illegal hunts, poorly documented, and the impact on populations is unknown. However, several species are now listed as threatened as a direct result of hunting activities. Several recent studies even report an increase of these hunts. We therefore call on contracting governments to develop national legislation prohibiting the commercial or other direct takes of small cetaceans, and to implement and enforce existing laws prohibiting or restricting the directed hunting of small cetaceans. Such legislation, among other benefits to the species, will allow these populations to rebuild and to better fulfill their ecological role in the marine or freshwater ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you. With this, we have completed the interventions, and please pass the floor to Scientific Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we just would like to thank everyone for nice words said about the work of the Scientific Committee. Thank you again for coming to us and telling us what you think we need to change. Again, we want to work for you and provide the best advice to you in the clearest manner. I'd like to thank all the conveners for the Scientific Committee and also and mainly and most importantly the rapporteurs. The reports of the Scientific Committee are a huge task, and if it wasn't for the rapporteurs, we wouldn't be able to do that. So thank you all, and thank you, my friend. Goodbye. You're free. You're off the hook.
See you later. See you later.
And I just wanted to really tell you that I appreciate everything you've done as chair of the Scientific Committee. Personally, I learned a lot, but I'm glad you're around, and I'm glad we're going to interact more within the Scientific Committee. So thanks a lot.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you. With this, we have completed this agenda item, and the next one is adoption of the scientific report and the work plan. We have heard only support for the work of the Scientific Committee. We heard some proposals and ideas how to increase involvement in the work of the Scientific Committee, and we heard no objections to the report. So can I consider the scientific meeting reports from 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022 adopted, and its recommendations endorsed, and the work plan adopted? I hear no objections, so with this, it is adopted. As usually under any agenda item, we still have any other matters. So are there any interventions under any other matters? Iceland, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Science Committee for their work and also comment a little bit on a point that was made in the presentation of the Science Committee, where the Science Committee referred to Annex K for the implications of the and consequences of further cuts to the budget. That refers to the report of the budget implication from 2021. In that report, and this is kind of prequel to the discussion when we get into the discussion on the financial implications, there's on page 4, figure 3, there's a pie chart that shows the distribution of the research budget in 2019 across different areas of focus. And roughly 1/3 of that research budget at that time is devoted to topics that overlap with the Conservation Committee. So, as Iceland is very concerned about the financial health of the IWC, Iceland would like to know the implications of that if those topics that overlap with the work that overlaps with the Conservation Committee, what implication would that have in general on the work of the Science Committee? And what would be the potential savings of if we needed to cut into the budget of the Science Committee? So I don't expect is to get a clear answer to this at this point, but I would like the Secretariat to prepare those figures before the discussion on the financials that will take place tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Iceland, and that is actually a good transition to the agenda items I just intend to open. As there is no more request for the floor, I close also any other matters. And with this, we close also the agenda item 13, Scientific Committee. And as I announced earlier, now I would like one after another open and then again adjourn the agenda items that we have started to discuss yesterday and we will continue to discuss tomorrow, which is 6.3 F&A committee and discussions we have there in relation to working group on operational effectiveness and on the biennial budget. And then also 7.1, the schedule amendment, and all 3 resolutions under the agenda point 8. The objective now is that proponents or those who are leading the discussions inform the plenary about the situation and also indicate the potential way forward if they agreed already. So first I would open the agenda item 6.3, which is discussion under F&A. And first part would be those parts on proposals from working group on operational effectiveness. So US, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As you recall from our discussion the other day, there was no consensus on all of the working group on operational effectiveness proposals. And I was tasked with meeting with delegations over the past couple of days to bring back some components which might be able to be considered for adoption by the Commission, in particular those that didn't have any financial implications or impact on the mandate of the Commission. We've been working on that. We will submit a revised document to the Secretariat by 6 p.m. tonight, which will highlight those in particular, as well as capture the discussion we heard regarding proposed intersessional tasks to the working group for work over the next biennium. And those will be ready for discussion tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, under the same agenda item is our discussions on biennial budget. And I would ask Australia to brief us.
Thank you, Chair. Just to briefly recap the discussion from plenary yesterday, we heard interventions from at least 16 contracting governments, with the majority expressing a preference for or flexibility to accept option 2, which is the option the Budgetary Subcommittee recommended the Commission adopt. This morning, we circulated a more detailed breakdown of the 3 balanced budget options. We've had several questions received by email, which we have responded to or are in the process of doing so shortly. We encourage anyone else with questions on the line items to please reach out this afternoon. During the discussion last night, we heard questions on whether it would be possible to defer the budget decision until IWC 69 or to stagger the implementation of fee increases. Concerns were raised in particular about the ability of contracting governments to accommodate increases for 2023 in their national budgets, noting that most countries are still feeling the economic impacts of the pandemic, and many national budgets for the 2022 and 2023 financial year have already been set. To address these concerns and noting in particular the challenges facing developing and emerging economies at this time, the Budgetary Subcommittee would like to seek the Commission's views on exploring 2 possible pathways, noting, of course, the urgency of the budget situation and the need for the Commission to address it at this meeting. So the first pathway is to revise option 2 so that the fee increases required under this option are deferred in full until 2024. This would mean that member fees would remain the same as they currently are in 2023 and then increase by the full required amount in 2024. Savings would still be applied across the biennium as proposed, but this provides an additional 12 months or more for countries to work through the implementation of those changes. The second approach is for the Commission to consider allowing a grace period of 12 months for capacity to pay groups 1 and 2 countries to pay the increased portion of their contributions for the next biennium. It's important to note that either of these approaches would likely have impacts on the Commission's cash flow. We expect this should be manageable, but we'll provide further advice if the Commission requests either of these options to be presented for consideration. The Commission could also, just in terms of cash flow, consider other options, including by allowing, but of course not requiring, for those countries who may be able to prepay their contributions for the full biennium to do so. And of course, voluntary contributions for the Commission's core funds would be strongly encouraged. Just to note, if the Commission were to consider the second of these approaches, it would also need to ensure that voting rights are not adversely impacted. We can provide further advice on this if the Commission decides to explore these approaches. But I would also like to remind the Commission at this point of the separate proposal before the Commission from the Working Group on Operational Effectiveness and F&A to consider the timing of payments and voting rights during the next intersessional period, which would provide recommendations on how these matters could be managed in the long term. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Australia. Now, you would prefer to have a feedback from countries coming bilaterally to you till tomorrow morning, let's say, till tomorrow certain time?
Yes, I'm happy for countries to approach directly, but it would be good to get a sense of whether the Commission is supportive of us revising the budget proposal to include these additional approaches to managing option 2.
Australia, sorry for asking back you were maybe too quick for me. You will make these proposals available in some written form?
If that's the preferred approach, we can certainly update the balanced budget proposal and resubmit that as a revision by 6 p.m. If the Commission's supportive of that.
Thank you. I presume that for the contracting governments, that would be easier because they would have time to look at the proposals during the evening and tomorrow morning, and then I would raise this during the morning session tomorrow. I see nodding, so thank you. Then with this, I would again adjourn the agenda item 6.3, and I would open the agenda item 7.1 on South Atlantic Whale Sanctuary, so schedule amendment, also to invite proponents to brief us on the deliberations that they have made. If one of the proponents wishes to briefly update us.
Okay.
Brazil.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, can you ask again, please?
No problem. If you wish, just to update the delegations, the plenary about deliberations that were made in this period.
Regarding the
South Atlantic proposal.
Well, at the disposal bilaterally or even here to anyone who has need of clarification about the proposal. I'm sure my Argentinian and Uruguayan colleagues will also be of help. But the proposal is seems to be clear enough, and we will keep it, and we will take it to voting.
Thank you, Brazil.
Thank you.
With this, I adjourn the agenda item 7.1, South Atlantic Whale Sanctuary. I pass the floor to agenda item, I will open the agenda item 8, so proposed resolutions. And first, the agenda item 8.1, which is resolution on marine plastic pollution. And I will pass the floor again to proponents. Please floor to the Czech Republic.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just quick summary, if I may, probably on behalf not only EU member states party to the convention, but on behalf of other proponents, if you allow me. Just quick update, after the consultation with other proponents and contracting governments, the new revised version of the proposed resolution on marine plastic pollution was submitted to the Secretariat and was already published on the IWC68 webpage, if I'm not mistaken. Just to explain, there are no substantial changes in the content of the resolution. Some rewarding was provided to reflect work that can be done with respect to the costs related to the implementation of the resolution. And I'm glad to inform all contracting governments that the estimated costs related to the implementation of this proposed resolution are now 10 times lower than those that have been provided before. And I would like to take this opportunity and also thank those contracting governments contributed actively to our efforts to finalize the text. And also to the colleagues from the Secretariat for all help provided. It's really appreciated. To the point, if possible, we would like to discuss this proposed resolution on marine plastic pollution during tomorrow's plenary session, if possible. And based on what we have heard from the contracting governments yesterday and consultation we had with other proponents, we hope that this resolution can be adopted by consensus. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. With this, I adjourn the agenda item 8.1 and I open the agenda item 8.2, which is a resolution on food security. And I presume Ghana will brief us. So please pass the floor to Ghana.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The proponents met with a number of countries and then the international NGOs this afternoon during lunchtime. The proponent brought clarity to what they sought to achieve with this resolution. Questions were asked, questions were answered. At the end of it, we got an understanding of what the resolution is about, and rewording and edits of various portions have been made by participants in the meeting, and the group will be considering it, hoping to finalize it for submission and hopefully for us to get a consensus on it by tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. With this, I adjourn the agenda item 8.2 on food security resolution, and I open the agenda item 8.3, draft resolution on the implementation of a conservation and management program for whale stocks aimed towards the lifting of the moratorium and the orderly development of the whaling industry. I ask the proponents to brief us about the situation and deliberations. So please floor to Antigua and Barbuda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The proponents met with a diverse group over the luncheon period. There were just no convergence on anything that would indicate that there could be any sort of adaptation by consensus of this document. That is unfortunate, but we are still holding out hope that where there's a will, there can be a way. And the will from the proponents are certainly there. So I'd like for us to keep this agenda item open until the 11th hour so that we can continue to press for consensus on this matter.
Thank you. With this, I adjourn this agenda item. And as we still have time and as we might lack time in the next days, I would continue with the agenda item 14, which is cooperation with other organizations. This agenda item will allow the Secretariat to report on collaborative work with other organizations. I would simply pass the floor to our Executive Secretary. Rebecca, please.
Thank you very much, Secretary. Chairman. The document IWC68 1401 gives an update on the Secretary's engagement with other organizations. As we stated earlier, the Commission, the Scientific Committee, Conservation Committee, they all have adopted a number of recommendations over the years that call for strengthening the Secretariat's engagement and the IWC's engagement with other organizations. Of course, this reflects the expanding range of human activities that have an impact on cetacean populations. The IWC Secretariat, in collaboration with all of you, members of the SCCC and our support groups like standing working groups, have been working to carry out these mandates. The IWC is in charge of looking at population level impacts, in some cases welfare impacts of these activities, and try to find potential practical solutions to monitor and mitigate these impacts. And that does require cooperation with other organizations. I'm just going to highlight a few collaborative efforts and of course welcome any questions or discussions. So for shipping impacts, whether it's ship strikes or underwater noise or pollution, we work very closely with the IMO. And that allows us to try to make some changes on the floor at the IMO with using the scientific information, finding the right speeds, the right noise levels, etc. For bycatch, this is a lot of our work with the Committee on the Fisheries and FAO, a regional secretariats network, and several regional fishery management organizations, and CHEMLR, or recently, as my colleague just told you. And for overall ecosystem and environmental issues, we're working with the Convention on Biological Diversity, Convention on Migratory Species, you heard today from one of their daughter agreements, and of course, CITES. And I want to note our growing collaboration with Atlafco, Comafat, that includes the pilot internship program. You've all met ZNAM, I hope, and planning for capacity building for at-sea surveys and the use of those data when we're back from the surveys. We're very grateful to our partners at Comafat Atlafco for all that they do on many fronts, including communication. And I hope that you will join us tomorrow at 13:30 in the Pharaoh's Room. We're going to have a signing of our first MOU, and we'll be honored with the presence of the Minister of Fisheries from the Republic of Guinea. Thank you, Chair, for that opportunity, and I'm happy to address any questions.
Thank you, Rebecca. So the floor is open for any interventions by contracting governments first. So either questions or interventions. And I see UK, please.
Thank you, Chair. The UK is delighted to note the growing number of organisations with which the IWC cooperates on a broad range of issues. We recognise the importance of this work, particularly in the advancement of cetacean conservation, and are pleased to see the pivotal role the IWC is playing on so many fronts as a global expert on cetacean management and conservation issues. In particular, we would like to thank the Secretariat for managing these relationships and work programmes, and for ensuring the IWC maintains such a central role in global conservation efforts for cetaceans. This cooperation with other organisations contributes to the vital implementation of the IWC's work and is fully in line with the requirements of the IWC's convention. Thank you.
Thank you. Czech Republic.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Czech Republic, speaking on behalf of the EU member states party to the convention, would like to thank the Secretariat for compiling this important report and also for all the considerable progress in cooperation with other organizations in spite of the pandemic. We fully support the Secretariat in maintaining and deepening the cooperation with other organizations. The IWC can provide extensive expertise on the full range of cetacean issues and in turn profit from the knowledge that these organizations have to create synergies and avoid duplication of work. This contributes to an increase in impact of the IWC and strengthens the international recognition of the work and competence of the IWC in cetacean conservation and management. In this context, we would like to mention some organizations where cooperation is particularly important for us. These include IUCN and the liaison group of biodiversity-related conventions and its members, such as Convention on Biological Diversity or Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, CITES, basically, or CMS and its water agreements, ESCOBANs and ECOBAMs. Other important partners within the UN system are the International Maritime Organization for Underwater Anthropogenic Noise and Ship Strikes, the FAO, and regional fishery management organizations for their fishery-related work, including issues connected to animal welfare. Overall, we would like to voice our support for the increased cooperation through the agreements presented by the Secretariat in FAA Committee. It goes without saying that the Scientific Committee should continue to engage with the scientific bodies of other relevant organizations as well, as this is a very constructive and useful arrangement. We again would like to thank the IWC and the Secretariat for their continuous effort in this regard. We believe this is the right path to proceed, and we support the ongoing work towards building effective cooperation with all relevant organizations. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. US.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to join others thanking the Secretariat for this report and for their extensive work over the past extended intercessional period to augment our cooperation with other organizations. I wanted to take this moment in particular to highlight the work in the renewed MOU with the Center for Coastal Studies, which allows the program on entanglement response at this commission. This collaboration has made it possible to develop guidelines and host almost 1,300 trainees in more than 30 countries around the world to safely respond to entanglement incidents, and that is quite a significant body of work that this program has done. And along those lines, because we didn't note this under the other agenda item, I do want to highlight that I believe this is near the ending of the tenure of David Matilla and his work at the Secretariat. And the United States would like to thank David for his over a decade, I believe, of work at the Secretariat for kind of spearheading this program, helping to promote entanglement response trainings and getting trainees to train all around the world in so many countries so effectively. And I think I could speak on behalf of everyone thanking David for all of his work, and I think he deserves a round of applause.
So if I could just take a brief moment to, first of all, thank Norway for the gentle way, or maybe not so gentle way, that you introduced the importance of the welfare issue of this topic. And then also the governments of Australia, Norway, and the US for seeing that this was a topic which we all share, and beginning this initiative, but especially to Ryan, who, as a young, at the time, well, still young, sorry, delegate, push for this and convince people your vision and your tenacity to get this moving, and I'll always be grateful for that. And I think I'd like to thank all of you for your intelligence and passion. And I think what this has shown, at least to me, and I hope to everybody, is that we have a lot more in common than we don't. And this topic has been something that we all
can see what we share and need to do something about. And it's a common ground that we stand on. And I hope that going forward in the future, when we get to the difficult discussions, remember that we have a solid foundation of common ground to work from. And finally, I do want to say I'll be staying on temporarily, helping to make sure that this continues. We are going to be working with the coordinator of the network in Mexico, who is fantastic and will be taking over the capacity building side of it, and then working with the director of rescue at the Center for Coastal Studies for the convening of the global network and the continuation of advice on this topic. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you. We continue with the international with the interventions. So pass the floor, please, to the Republic of Guinea.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Quand je suis arrivé en début de semaine ici, j'ai eu l'occasion de faire une visite de courtoisie à notre secrétariat. J'ai pas manqué de leur dire combien de fois on était satisfait pour la qualité de leur travail. Je l'ai dit parce que nous sommes des témoins de premier plan. Ça fait au moins 22 ans que nous assistons aux rencontres de la Commission baleinière internationale. Et aujourd'hui, on travaille ici avec une telle aisance parce que le secrétariat a fait ce qu'il devrait faire. Nous avons toujours la documentation, nous avons toujours les informations. Donc, ils sont à féliciter. Autre chose que je vais relever, que j'apprécie beaucoup, le secrétariat a opéré de larges ouvertures vers d'autres continents. Je retrouve là-bas des Africains, je retrouve des Latino-Américains, des Européens, des Asiatiques, et je les remercie pour ça. Encore une fois de plus, je félicite et je remercie le secrétariat et avec insistance, Madame la secrétaire exécutive, je veux nommer Dr. Rebecca. Merci.
Thank you. Please pass microphone to Morocco.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to join the previous speakers to praise the efforts done by the IWC to conclude agreements and MOUs with the wide variety of organizations, which guarantee a full openness of our commission and enable it to build connections with all stakeholders concerned by the management and conservation of whales. Also, the IWC, through this cooperation, can be in a position to pass its expertise and value of its work to other institutions. In this regard, I congratulate the IWC and COMAFAT at LAFCO for the MOU that will be signed tomorrow. I would also thank the IWC for having accepted a Moroccan citizen for an internship at the Secretariat. Thanks, Secretariat. Thanks, Dr. Rebecca.
Thank you. List of contracting governments is empty. So observer, non-member government, IGOs, no, NGOs. I see one. Yeah, please pass the floor to the NGO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm making this intervention on behalf of the Animal Welfare Institute and 20 other non-governmental organizations. A full list of these groups will be provided to the Secretariat for inclusion in the report of the meeting. According to the UNEP WCMC CITES Trade Database, Norway and Iceland together have exported more than 14 million kilograms of whale meat and blubber within the period 2011 to 2020, with 99.5% of these products shipped to Japan. According to national statistics not yet included in the CITES trade database, Norway has exported a further 544,000 kilograms in 2021 and 2022. All of these exports took place under objections taken by Norway, Iceland, and Japan to the CITES Appendix 1 listing of whales, which prohibits international trade in whale products for primarily commercial purposes. By means of this trade, Norway and Iceland are undermining the effectiveness of two conventions. They are defying the IWC moratorium through their whaling under objection and reservation to the whaling ban, and they are circumventing the CITES trade ban. They are also ignoring a series of resolutions adopted by both conventions and repeated calls by CITES not to issue export permits. Specifically, they defy CITES resolution ResComp 11.4, which, to quote, recommends that parties agree not to issue any import or export permit or certificate for introduction from the sea under this convention for primarily commercial purposes for any specimen of the species or stock protected from commercial whaling by the International Convention for the Regulation of Whaling. We therefore respectfully call on both countries to refrain from issuing export permits, including for whale meat and blubber from the 2022 season, and to remove their reservations to the CITES Appendix 1 whale listings. While Japan is no longer an IWC member nation, it is still a party to CITES. We therefore also respectfully call on Japan to no longer issue CITES import permits. Finally, Mr. Chair, the organization supporting this intervention would like to thank the Executive Secretary and the Secretariat staff for their efforts to engage in outreach to other organizations. We'd like to thank the contracting governments in this room who have expressed their support for that work by the Secretariat. And then we'd also like to express our sincere thanks to David Matilla for all his work for the IWC. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. With this, we have finished all the interventions under this agenda item. And with this, I also close this agenda item 14. We still have some minutes, and I would like to reopen, or I need to reopen another agenda item that was adjourned. That is 1.4, Secretary's report on credentials and voting rights, as we have new delegations arriving. So please, Secretariat.
Thank you, Chair. And I take this opportunity to thank again New Zealand and Morocco for being on the Credentials Committee. It seems to be a nonstop job. So we have 54 contracting governments here, and all of the credentials are in order. We received 3 more sets of credentials. And 2 of those, all 3 of those have been approved. 2 of them are countries that plan to attend, and the other one is a country that's not going to come. So we have 57 sets of credentials approved. 54 are here. We hope that 55 and 56 will come tomorrow. And 57 is not going to make it. Should I give the country names, Chair?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. 55 and 56 are Ireland and I forgot, Slovak Republic. Thank you. And 57 is Senegal. Thank you.
Thank you for this report. With this, I adjourn this agenda item, and I would like to make some other announcements. Tomorrow, we will have a pretty challenging day in front of us. And in order to, let's say, tackle that day a bit better, I'm changing the timeline slightly. I'm calling for a private commissioners meeting tomorrow at 9 o'clock. So we will have 1.5 hours of private commissioners meeting, so from 9 till 10:30. And then we will start with the plenary at 11 o'clock. And from there on, the timeline is as you have it in your documents. Logistically, the private commissioners meeting will take place here at 9 o'clock, meaning that only commissioners or heads of delegations plus one will be able to enter the room, and all the rest will be able to enter this room after the PCOM's private commissioners meeting is finished, or at 11 o'clock. With this, this official part is now adjourned. I would like to use the opportunity to thank our translators who have worked hardly to make us understand and to make our meeting running. There are some side events tonight, and here I would pass the floor to our executive secretary.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this evening there is an event to inform all of our participants about fundraising. We thank Australia and the Vice Chair of the SC for getting this launched. So that starts at 7 p.m., goes to 8:30. There'll be snacks and beverages, and a really great opportunity to find out more about the various voluntary fund opportunities at the IWC. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. With this, I wish you a pleasant evening, and I see a request from Argentina. Please, Argentina.
Gracias, señor presidente, y perdón que solicite la palabra, pero me gustaría también reconocer el trabajo hecho por en el comité científico. Quisiera que, si todos lo comparten, que los saludemos, ya que terminó su gestión en estos años, y como dije antes, nos condujo durante los tiempos de pandemia. Entonces, si todos lo comparten, desearía pedir un aplauso también para él, por favor. Gracias.
I thought we gave already a question. I thought we gave already a question. Sorry. Thank you, Argentina, and thank you. With this, I wish you a pleasant evening, and we will meet commissioners here tomorrow at 9 o'clock, and all the rest of you can join us at 11 o'clock. Have a pleasant evening.